And welcome to Hannity tonight, a Hannity investigation into the IRS targeting Tea Party conservatives. We have full coverage, but first, our top story tonight, the White House is scrambling to respond to brand new allegations that top administration officials were responsible for editing the Benghazi talking points. Now, in a moment, we're going to show you highlights from today's intense press briefing, but first, an ABC News investigation is revealing that the Benghazi talking points, that they were revised 12 separate times. Now, it's important to note, we now have proof that major edits were made at the suggestion of political appointees. Now, one of those officials was State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland. When she received an early draft of the talking points, she made the political judgment to remove the paragraphs detailing recent terrorist attacks in the region because it, quote, could be abused by members of Congress to beat up the State Department for not paying attention to warnings. So why would we want to feed that? Remember, that was an email from a top aide to the Secretary of State, not a member of the intelligence community. So why then did Hillary Clinton appear before lawmakers and then, well, say this?
Well, there was evidence, and the evidence was being sifted and analyzed by the intelligence community, which is why the intelligence community was the principal decider about what went into talking points.
We now know that was a bold-faced lie because, as we just showed you, after one of Hillary's top advisors sent an email criticizing the official talking points, any and all references to al-Qaeda, terrorism, and any mention of CIA warnings that were issued prior to the attack, it was all scrubbed out of the talking points. Now, thankfully, the media is finally beginning to pay attention to something that we on this program have been saying for months, that an administration-wide national security cover-up took place following Benghazi, and it's all in the pursuit of power so Obama could get reelected. Now, earlier things got heated at the White House press briefing when Jay Carney was asked whether or not political calculations were made during the talking points review process. Watch this.
The language of that email is pretty clear. It certainly seems clear that there was an influence by the White House and the State Department on the CIA talking points.
But again, I think you're conflating a couple of things here. The White House, as I said, made one minor change to the talking points drafted by and produced by the CIA.
But was concerned about how Congress would react a factor in what went into those talking points.
Again, I think if you look at the development of the talking points, the answer to that is no.
Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
Well, I appreciate the question again, and I think that what I was referring to was the talking points that the CIA drafted and sent around, to which one change was made. And I accept that stylistic may not precisely describe a change of one word to another.
This was not a change of one word.
No, I'm just...
These underwent extensive changes after they were written by the CIA.
Sure.
These were concerns that were raised by the State Department that the White House directed the interagency process to use in making these talking points.
Well, I think
the CIA original version included references to al-Qaeda, references to Ansar al-Islam. The original CIA version included extensive discussion of the previous threats of terrorist attacks in Benghazi. Those were taken out after the CIA wrote its initial draft.
And then the CIA wrote another draft.
Based on input from the State Department.
Well, but here's what I've been saying, John.
Do you deny that?
No, John. These were intelligence community talking points that the intelligence community, led by the CIA, had. John, could I finish? You had a long time there. That the intelligence community has to sign off on and believe represents the intelligence community's view of what they knew at that time about what happened.
Wow. Now, Mr. Carney, do you honestly expect us to believe that all of these edits, you can see it right there, version 2, version 3, that all the references to al-Qaeda were removed without the prodding of the White House or the State Department? And by the way, didn't you say that these were just stylistic edits? That's a pretty hard sell, considering we know for a fact that the CIA director, then General Petraeus, told lawmakers in a classified briefing on November the 16th, 2012, that he thought Benghazi was a terror attack from day one. In other words, I think it's time for Jay Carney to stop blaming the intelligence community. And by the way, Jay, it might be time for you to resign. Joining me now with reaction, Fox News military analyst Colonel Oliver North. Sir, so we've got 12 different versions. 12 different edits. They claim only stylistically, but they removed those important factors, let's see, that warned that this could happen ahead of time. And 2, removing all references that this was a terror attack. And we can add and then inserted a lie that they knew was a lie, Colonel. Where's this going?
Look, I'll tell you where this is going, straight downhill. And it's going downhill because, first of all, they've been lying ever since before the attack happens. Think about this. All these talking point iterations, 12 of them now, are all after the fact. What they're missing, and I think somebody in the White House press corps is going to find this out, is that the CIA warned about the imminent terror attack on the anniversary of 9/11 days before the event. And the White House and the Pentagon and the State Department did absolutely nothing to preposition any quick response forces in the region. That is criminal negligence at worst and major incompetence at best. And that's what they're trying to cover up. Of course, it's not just the bad narrative that really is al-Qaeda still around after bin Laden is dead. It's also the incompetence, the misfeasance, malfeasance it leaves all of those embassies uncovered. 12 hours between one attack, 10 hours during the attack in Libya, and doing nothing about the whole thing except doctoring talking points. All right, so outrageous.
All of those adjectives fit. So we have the original warnings that came from people at the embassy, the consulate themselves, saying, hey, we need extra security. That was denied. Then the CIA was warning that they might be a potential target. And then we've got 2 stand-downs during the actual attack when Americans are under fire, Colonel, and we don't know who gave those orders either. And now we know that it was all edited in the aftermath of this.
And in the aftermath of all of that, months later after the election, poor old Tom Pickering, 80-plus years of age, co-authoring a so-called Accountability Review Board report, whitewashes the whole thing. Tom Pickering, Sean, in 1983 to 85 was our ambassador in El Salvador. He was targeted for assassination by the FSLN terror group down in El Salvador. We tripled the security for Tom Pickering. Wouldn't you think that somebody like Tom Pickering would have said, what happened to Ambassador Stevens was outrageous. I was protected. Why wasn't he? And yet none of that's in this report.
You know, we still have this other same pattern, Colonel. I mean, this is Ansar al-Sharia, which is an offshoot of al-Qaeda, just like Fort Hood, just like man-caused disasters and overseas contingency operations. There is this
don't forget workplace violence.
Workplace violence. The mysterious reluctance and resistance to just admit that there are radical Islamic terrorists that want to kill us. Now, in this case, I think it's tied to the presidential ambition of Barack Obama, and they didn't want this 2 months outside of an election.
No doubt about that. There's also another factor here, and that is the total lack of human intelligence. We've become so dependent on technical intelligence, signals intelligence and the like, that we don't have people on the ground who can tell us who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. Think about what that means for what's about to happen with Syria. We still don't have it. Our intelligence service is totally dependent on technical intelligence collection and overhead stuff from UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, or satellites.
Well, how did we get from here to there? In other words, General Petraeus, he knew right away. The president of Libya knew right away what this was, terror attack. Now, they never, for example, Susan Rice, who read the talking points, regurgitated the talking points, she never spoke to Mr. Hicks, who was there, who knew, and Mr. Hicks was then excoriated and later demoted for daring to tell the truth in all of this. How did we get from a real terror attack that they recognized to this is linked to a YouTube video? This was spontaneous. How many how many protesters do you know that have a rocket-propelled grenade in their back pocket for a spontaneous demonstration, Colonel? Is that a common thing?
Yeah. How many of these guys are out there watching a YouTube video made in California? I mean, the reality of it is this was concocted as an excuse for their incompetence in not doing anything. Anniversary attacks are commonplace with terror organizations. They memorialize their own existence with that. There's never a time that we can look at the 9/11 date, no matter where it is, and not expect that something is going to happen. They did nothing to prepare for it. And it totally conflates their whole theory that once bin Laden was dead, we don't have to worry about al-Qaeda anymore. Twofold excuses, bad judgment all around.
What's the
major
aftermath?
Incompetence. Well, the aftermath ought to be that Frank Wolf, Congressman Frank Wolf, my congressman, has a resolution to form a select committee. It's time for one. They ought to do it.
Mr. President, if you have nothing to hide, you can go ahead and you can get the Attorney General to do this. And I think it's time. I agree with you. Colonel Oliver North, you're a great American. Thanks for being with us.
Save home.